Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. U.S. President Joe Biden lands in Saudi Arabia and meets Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, sealing a retreat from his campaign pledge to return the kingdom into a pariah over human rights abuses. Southwest Europe enters the sixth day of a summer heat wave, bracing for more temperature records over the weekend and early next week. And the U.S. said it would resume flights to the International Space Station with Russia, despite its attempts to isolate Moscow over the invasion of Ukraine. And the Philippine National Police will deploy close to 22,000 personnel to secure the first State of the Nation address of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. at the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City on July 25th. Good evening and thank you for joining us today on this Saturday night. We begin in Saudi Arabia, where U.S. President Joe Biden is on day 3 of his 4-day trip to the Middle East. It is his first trip as president to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to meet the king and country's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And today, President Biden said he told MBS to his face that he believes the young leader is to blame for the killing of Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi. Prince Mohammed drew global outrage for the 2018 killing of the Saudi journalist Khashoggi in the kingdom's Istanbul consulate, an operation U.S. intelligence services said he approved. Saudi officials denied that Prince Mohammed's involvement and they say Khashoggi's death resulted from a rogue operation. Meanwhile, President Biden defended his visit to Saudi Arabia despite its poor human rights record. He said the country is vital to the security in the region. Take a look. With the bump of 2 fists, President Biden gave Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, the 5-second exchange that grabbed the world's attention. The president was reluctant to meet with MBS, having denounced him publicly after U.S. intelligence that Saudi Crown Prince has ordered the killing of one of his critics, Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi. President Biden said he raised the issue of the murder with MBS, with the fist bumps continuing with other top U.S. officials. Despite his earlier condemnations of Saudi human rights abuses, Biden now appears ready to re-engage with the kingdom, a key strategic U.S. ally, a major supplier of oil, and an avid buyer of weapons. And here's U.S. President Joe Biden, and he said he raised the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the top of the meeting with MBS.
With respect to the murder of Khashoggi, I raised it at the top of the meeting, making it clear what I thought of it at the time and what I think of it now. And it was exactly, I was straightforward and direct in discussing it. I made my view crystal clear. I said very straightforwardly, for an American president to be silent on an issue of human rights, is this inconsistent with who we are and who I am. I'll always stand up for our values.
Mr. President, what was the Crown Prince's response to your comments about Khashoggi?
He basically said that he was not personally responsible for it. I indicated I thought he was. He said he was not personally responsible for it, and he took action against those who were responsible. And then I went on to talk more about how that dealing with any opposition to or criticism of the Saudi administration in other countries was viewed as, to me, a violation of human rights.
Mr. President, sir, 2 quick questions, if I may. First, we just heard from Jamal Khashoggi's wife, who said after this visit, the blood of MBS's next victim is on your hands. What do you say to Mrs. Khashoggi?
I'm sorry she feels that way. I was straightforward back then. I was straightforward today. This is a meeting, I didn't come here to meet with the Crown Prince. I came here to meet with the GCC and 9 nations to deal with the security and the needs of the free world, and particularly the United States, and not leave a vacuum here. which was happening as it has in other parts of the world.
Khashoggi, a Saudi who wrote critically of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the Washington Post, was strangled to death and dismembered in October 2018 after entering the kingdom's Istanbul consulate to fill out paperwork to marry Cengiz, who is Turkish. 2 years ago, as he campaigned to become U.S. president, Biden accused the Crown Prince of serious human rights abuses. He also vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah. But he traveled Friday to Jeddah and was pictured fist-bumping the 36-year-old de facto ruler of the oil-rich kingdom. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. concluded a number of key agreements related to energy, clean technology, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and tourism during the visit of President Joe Biden to Jeddah. Let's listen in.
On the margins of this important historic visit by President Biden, we have concluded a number of key agreements related to energy, clean technology, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and tourism. These represent a significant step forward, further elevating the unparalleled opportunities available to investors in both countries, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Now, Washington wants the world's largest crude exporter to open the floodgates to bring down soaring oil prices, which threaten Democratic chances in November midterm elections. The meeting in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia's second city on the Red Sea coast, brings together leaders of the 6-member Gulf Cooperation Council, as well as Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq. White House officials have used the trip as a bid to promote integration between Israel and Arab nations. Saudi Arabia has refused to join the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords, which in 2020 created ties between Israel and two of the kingdom's neighbors, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Riyadh has repeatedly said it would stick to the decades-old Arab League position of not establishing official ties with Israel until the conflict with the Palestinians is resolved. However, it is showing signs of greater openness towards Israel, and on Friday announced it was lifting overflight restrictions on aircraft traveling to and from Israel. Now, the U.S. leader welcomed the historic decision, the latest conciliatory move by Riyadh concerning the Jewish state, which it has refused to recognize despite intensive efforts by the Israelis to establish ties with Arab countries. Prior to President Biden's arrival in Israel at the start of his Middle East trip on Wednesday, Washington had hinted that more Arab nations could take steps to pursue relations with the Jewish state. Now, that spurred speculation about whether Riyadh would alter its long-held position of not establishing official bilateral ties until the conflict with the Palestinians is resolved. A spate of wildfires is scorching parts of Europe, with firefighters battling blazes in Portugal, Spain, France, plus Croatia. Authorities are now linking the extreme weather and unusual heat wave to climate change. A mass of hot and dry air that are blown in by African winds is driving temperatures in the Iberian Peninsula as high as 47 degrees Celsius. A red alert for almost half of Portugal. Much of the drought in the country is at maximum fire risk. 5 regions in the center and north where temperatures hit a July record 47 Celsius on Thursday before dropping back. A plane that was battling forest fires in the Bragança region crashed on Friday near Vila Nova de Foscoa in northern Portugal, killing its pilot, according to the civil defense. As of late Thursday, the fires had killed 1 person and injured around 60. Dozens of blazes have already forced hundreds of residents to evacuate. Several dozen homes have been damaged or destroyed. Neighboring Spain, where temperatures were as high as 37 degrees Celsius by 7 a.m., a fire that broke out Thursday near the Monfrag National Park, a protected area renowned for wildlife in the extreme Madura region, continued to blaze. Spanish authorities reported close to 20 fires still raging out of control, with one near Mijas in the deep south, inland from regional capital Malaga, forcing some 2,300 people to evacuate their homes. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez tweeted he was closely following the evolution of active fires posing an extreme risk. The mercury reached 45.4 degrees Celsius in Spain on Thursday, shy of the all-time high of 47.4 degrees Celsius registered in August last year. In southwestern France, flames have destroyed some 7,700 hectares since Tuesday and forced the evacuation of 11,000 people, including many holidaymakers who decided to abandon their vacation rather than remain in makeshift shelters set up by local authorities. As French President Emmanuel Macron vowed authorities would do everything to mobilize resources to fight the fallout, the Bordeaux public prosecutor indicated a criminal origin was its main line of inquiry for at least one fire near the southwestern city. One fire was raging in pine forests near France's Dune du Pilat, Europe's tallest sand dune and a magnet for tourists. Southern France, battling temperatures around 40 degrees Celsius on Friday, is bracing for more heat next week, with 16 departments already on orange, a severe alert. And across the Mediterranean, authorities said one person was found dead in northern Morocco. As forest fires rage, authorities also evacuated hundreds of people from more than a dozen villages in northwestern Morocco. Fanned by strong winds, the fires that broke out on Wednesday have destroyed 1,600 hectares of woodland in the province of Larache, Kazan, Taza, and Tetuan. The North African nation, which is struggling under intense droughts, has in recent days been hit by soaring temperatures approaching 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, Britain's meteorological agency issued its first ever red warning for exceptional heat, with nights exceptionally warm. It warned that illness and death could occur among the fit and the healthy. The Met Office said there was a 50% chance on Monday or Tuesday of temperatures topping 40 degrees Celsius for the first time, and an 80% chance that the country's previous record of 38.7 degrees Celsius set in 2019 will be exceeded. UK hospitals have warned of a surge in heat-related admissions, and train operators have told passengers to expect cancellations. The Irish Meteorological Office issued a weather warning for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, with exceptionally warm weather. A high of 32 degrees Celsius was possible on Monday, according to Met Arian, just short of Ireland's record high of 33.3 degrees set in 1887. A scientific officer with the UN's World Meteorological Organization warned that temperatures will become more extreme in the coming years, speaking during a press briefing in Geneva as a heat wave is sweeping across southwestern Europe, with scorching temperatures fueling stubborn wildfires that ravage several countries. Let's listen in.
High temperatures. It is not easy to attribute any single high pressure condition and heat wave event directly to climate change. However, what we know and what we have seen is that heat waves are becoming more frequent, more prevalent, and their temperatures are becoming more extreme as well. So that kind of link over extended period of time, years, we can attribute to climate change. We cannot say that this particular heat wave is a product of climate change. We can say, however, that evidence points towards heat waves becoming more prevalent and their temperatures becoming more extreme in the coming years.
And according to Bob Ward, who works at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment, we will see these heat waves become more intense and more frequent for at least the next 30 years. Let's take a look.
Well, this looks to be a period of extended high temperatures. We quite often get short periods of heat wave conditions in Europe, but we have from time to time had long periods. 2003 is the summer heat wave in August 2003 is the one that most people remember, and it killed many people in Europe, and it looks like we might be developing something similar in the week ahead. So you get hot weather in summer, it's natural in Europe, but what we've got is a high pressure system building over most of Europe, and it's the high pressure that creates the high temperatures. And it looks as if there might be a possibility of a so-called heat dome, where you get a high pressure system that builds and then just sits over the region for an extended period, trapping the hot air in and leading to very high temperatures. There is some suggestion that climate change is leading to these kind of episodes becoming more frequent, but it's still too early to say. But we do know that the buildup of greenhouse gases itself traps more of the heat, and therefore when we get heat waves, they're now becoming more intense and more frequent in their occurrence. The global average temperature of the Earth has been increasing since the late 19th century due to the buildup of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and that buildup will continue until we effectively get to zero emissions of greenhouse gases. The earliest that might happen is 2050, but it does mean that for the next 3 decades the average temperature will go up, and it means the extremes will go up. So we will see these heat waves become more intense and more frequent for at least the next 30 years. It kills hundreds and thousands of people every year across Europe, mostly people who are vulnerable and have underlying health conditions such as respiratory illness. But if we get temperatures in the high 30s and low 40s degrees Celsius, that's a danger to healthy people as well, particularly people who are engaged in strenuous activity outside, people who may be working on construction sites or are working on farms. So these cities are particularly exposed to heat because they're made of lots of dark man-made surfaces that tend to absorb the sun's energy and turn it into heat rather than reflecting it. And so cities like London, you find, are several degrees higher in temperature than in the surrounding countryside, and that's why people in cities are particularly exposed. Also combines with local air pollution. You tend to get hot days when it's very sunny. The sunlight creates higher levels of local air pollution. You have still air and it all kind of congregates. So
in today's other news, the United States said it would resume flights to the International Space Station with Russia despite its attempts to isolate Moscow over the invasion of Ukraine. To ensure continued safe operations of the ISS, protect the lives of astronauts, and ensure continuous U.S. presence in space, NASA will resume integrated crews on U.S. crew spacecraft and the Russian Soyuz, according to the U.S. Space Agency NASA in a statement. NASA said that astronaut Frank Rubio would fly with 2 Russian cosmonauts on a Soyuz rocket scheduled to launch on September 21 from Kazakhstan. The announcement came hours after President Vladimir Putin fired the head of Russia's space agency, Dmitry Rogozin, a firebrand nationalist and ardent backer of the Ukraine invasion, who once quipped that U.S. astronauts should get to the space station on trampolines rather than Russian rockets. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov did not indicate that his removal meant Putin was unhappy with Rogozin. One independent media outlet said he would be promoted and could be put in charge of occupied territories in Ukraine. Now, NASA said that the International Space Station was always designed to be operated jointly with the participation from the space agencies of the United States, Russia, Europe, Japan, and Canada. And the death toll of a Russian missile strike on the central Ukrainian city of Vinnytsia on Thursday rose to 24 after a woman died in hospital of her burned wounds, according to Ukrainian officials. Russia claims the strikes, hundreds of kilometers from the front lines, had targeted a meeting of Ukrainian military officials and foreign arms suppliers. Kiev has denied these claims and says the attack killed 3 children. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said he was appalled by the attack, while the EU has slammed it as an atrocity. Faced with an unprecedented combination of shocks, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, called for measures to support the most vulnerable parts of the population. The 2-day meeting on the island of Bali began under the shadow of a Russian military assault that has roiled markets, spiked food prices, and stoked breakneck inflation. Take a look.
We are faced with a combination of exogenous shocks that I don't think we have ever experienced. We had first a pandemic that brought the world economy to a standstill and pushed us into recession. The war in Ukraine creating a second exogenous shock on top of the first, and before the first is even over, and accelerating inflation that has started even before. While monetary policy has to tighten, fiscal policy needs to still buffer the most vulnerable parts of the population and businesses against the impact of this monetary policy tightening. In other words, for the 2 levers, they still need to work together, but need to work together in a very different manner. We lived through 2 shocks in 2 years. The way we have approached dealing with the climate crisis is guaranteed that we would have more shocks to come. I don't know when, I don't know how, I only know they'll be there. So we do need to think through the right policy mix for a world of more frequent and severe exogenous shocks.
Russia's unjustified war against Ukraine sent a shockwave through the global economy. Indeed, the fallout from this shockwave is an overarching focus of our discussions in Bali. Russia's war has propagated a commodity price shock as prices of food, fertilizer, and energy remain high, resulting in more people going hungry.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Good news sa lahat ng mahilig magluto at kumain.
May bago at katakam-takam na cooking show dito lamang sa Net25. Ako si Pat Daza.
Ako naman si Sandy Daza.
Samahan niyo kaming magpinsan dito sa Lutong Daza.
Bukod sa masarap at abot kaya na recipes, masarap ang kwentuhan at halakhakan dito.
At syempre, laging may special celebrity guest.
Huwag kalimutan,
Lutong Daza, dito lamang sa Net25.
Welcome back. The resignation of Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa comes after months of protests blaming his government for the mismanagement of the island nation's economy, with a foreign exchange crisis leading to severe hardships for its 22 million people. Inflation is rampant and the country has nearly exhausted its already scarce supplies of petrol, with the government ordering the closure of non-essential offices and schools to reduce commuting and save fuel. Take a look.
An unexpected pool party at Sri Lanka's presidential palace. But President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was not hosting. He fled the Colombo residence just minutes before tens of thousands of protesters overran it on July 9th. After initially resisting the people's call, Rajapaksa resigned shortly after arriving in Singapore, having fled Sri Lanka.
ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවේ 38 එක ආවගන්තිය ප්‍රකාරව ගරු ජනාධිපති ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා විසින් එවන ලද ඉල්ලා අස්වීමේ ලිපිය මා වෙත ලැබී ඇත.
The dramatic events are the culmination of months of protests. Sri Lankans are enraged by the economic crisis and the Rajapaksa clan's incompetence and alleged corruption. The South Asian nation is facing hyperinflation and critical shortages of essentials like food, fuel, and medicine. But how exactly did Sri Lanka get here? '73-year-old Gotabaya became president in 2019, a member of a clan that has dominated politics in the country for decades. Brother Mahinda has served as both president and prime minister before quitting politics just a couple of months ago amid the unrest. Various members of their family were given positions in government. The Rajapaksas have been accused of chronic mismanagement of the country's finances and corruption over the years. Sri Lankans have endured months of medicine and food shortages, electricity blackouts, fuel stations have run out of petrol and diesel.
How many people gathered here, they are shouting we don't have fuel here, we don't have gas here. Now the medical supplies are very low and the food very low.
Sri Lanka defaulted on its $51 billion foreign debt in April and has been in talks with the IMF for a possible bailout for months. The country is now also facing hyperinflation. Many goods, if they can be found, have become unaffordable for most. The UN says 3/4 of the population have reduced their food intake as a result.
நல்ல தலைவனை கொண்டு வந்தோம் நினைச்சு கொண்டு வந்தோம் நல்ல தலைவன் அவன் பார்த்தானா இப்படி கீழ் சாதித்தனமான வேலைகளை செஞ்சுட்டு இப்படி நாசமான போன காரியங்களை செஞ்சுட்டு நாட்டு மக்களை பசியில போட்டுக்கிறான் அவனோட உருப்படுவானுங்களா இனி ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு தலைவன் கிடைக்க மாட்டானா எங்களுக்கு அப்படின்ற ஏக்கம் இருக்குது மேடம்.
சாப்பாடு சரி கஷ்டம், ஒரு நேரம் சாப்பிட்டு ஒரு நேரத்தில் எல்லாம் பசியில் இருக்கிறோம். யாரை போயிட்டு கேட்குறது? ஒரு நேரம் சாப்பிட்டு இப்போ காலையிலேருந்து நாங்கள் ஒன்றும் சாப்பிட இல்லை. யார் தர போகிறோம்? எந்த அரசாங்கத்தில் தர்றாங்க?
Protests erupted in April 2022. Sri Lankans defied nationwide curfews under a state of emergency.
இளைஞர்கள் ஊடகவியலாளர்கள் இது மட்டுமல்லாமல் விவசாயிகள் எல்லா துறையினரும் இன்றைக்கு நாங்கள் பாதைகளில் வீதிகளில் இறங்கி நாங்கள் இந்த அரசாங்கத்திற்கு எதிராக குரல் எழுப்புவது வேறொன்றும் இல்லை. எங்களுக்கு ஜனநாயகம் முக்கியம். அதே போல எங்களுடைய நாட்டில் இருக்கிற மனிதர்கள் அனைவரும் தங்களுடைய தன்னிறைவான உணவை பெற்றுக்கொள்ள வேண்டிய அவசியம் இருக்கின்றது. அதே போல அவருடைய உரிமைகளை வென்றெடுக்க வேண்டிய அவசியம் இருக்கிறது.
People were killed and injured.
We want the whole Rajapaksa clan out because they are so corrupt. They have been eating into Sri Lanka like a caterpillar eating into some fruit or a leaf.
Protesters are becoming stronger. So in time to come, I think they have to fall in line. I mean, they can't go on because they already, people got frustrated, the posters have got frustrated, the general public got frustrated. So obviously they have to leave. There is no other way.
Gotabai's resignation has been accepted by the parliament. He emailed his notice from Singapore where he fled to seek refuge. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has been sworn in as acting president, but many of the demonstrators see him as complicit and also want him to go. Parliament will meet in mid-July to elect an MP to succeed Rajapaksa for the rest of his term.
Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's ousted president said in his resignation letter read out in Parliament that he wanted to stress that he had always done his best for the motherland. Take a look. He said, "I have contributed my utmost for the country, and in the future too, I will contribute for the country." Gotabaya Rajapaksa's brief note sent from the safety of a safe haven in Singapore blamed COVID-19 for the financial meltdown that triggered months of protests, culminating in his humiliating escape abroad. Rajapaksa claimed Sri Lanka's reserves were already low when he took office in November 2019, and the subsequent pandemic devastated the economy. But critics say the government's mismanagement was a crucial factor. Official figures show Sri Lanka had $7.5 billion in foreign exchange reserves when he took over, dropping to just $1 million by the time he quit. The country is officially bankrupt. Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs here raised the alert level 2 for Filipinos in Sri Lanka due to the security situation in that country, but they clarified that there is no evacuation plan just yet. The department emphasized that there are no plans yet to evacuate Filipinos from Sri Lanka at this time, and based on its latest data, there are more than 500 Filipinos in Sri Lanka. Alert level 2 is issued when there are, quote, real threats to the life, security, and property of Filipinos arising from an internal disturbance in or external threat to the host country. Under this classification, there will be no new deployment of overseas Filipino workers to Sri Lanka, and only those with existing employment contracts are allowed to return to the country. The advisory came days after thousands of protesters stormed the official residence of former Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who had been blamed for the spiraling economic crisis in this country. The DFA said no Filipino has so far been reported injured due to the mass protests. In other news, in this country, the Philippine National Police will deploy close to 22,000 personnel to secure the first State of the Nation address, or SONA, of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. at the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City on July 25th. From the original plan of 15,174 personnel, the deployment will be increased to 21,843, according to National Capital Region Police Office Chief Major General Felipe Natividad. Natividad during his first interagency coordination meeting at Camp Bagong Diwa in Bicutan, Taguig City on Friday. Natividad said the security forces will be composed of 16,964 organic NCRPO personnel from 1,905 from PNP support units and 2,974 from other coordinating agencies and peacekeeping partners. They will apply the same template and security package utilized during the inauguration of President Marcos in Manila on June 30. The suspension to carry firearms outside of residence within the National Capital Region will be implemented from July 22nd to the 27th. Stricter police inspections will be conducted in Oplancita checkpoints by foot and mobile patrol teams. Natividad said road rerouting plans have been laid down by the MMDA through Emmanuel Miro, Traffic Operations Officer 5, to pave the way for the essential vehicles to freely utilize portions of Commonwealth Avenue, the main thoroughfare leading to the House of Representatives, and where zipper lanes will be set up. The cooperation between China and the Philippines under the Marcos administration will center on agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and cultural exchanges, according to the Chinese Foreign Minister or Chinese Foreign Affairs. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin, in a July 15 statement, said that the two nations made the commitment during the official visit of Foreign Minister Wang Yi to Manila last week. Mr. Wang said, quote, the two sides agreed to conduct cooperation in the four key areas of large-scale agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and cultural and people-to-people exchanges to enhance friendship and cooperation. Both sides, he said, stressed that the South China Sea issue is not the sum total of bilateral relations. During his July 5 to 6 trip to the Philippines, Mr. Wang paid courtesy calls on President Marcos, Vice President Sara Duterte, Foreign Secretary Enrique Manalo, National Security Advisor Clarita Carlos, and other ranking government officials. Meanwhile, oil companies here in the country are set to implement another batch of oil price rollback next week, ranging from 1 peso and 70 centavos to 4 pesos and 90 centavos per liter. Based on the projected price movement, diesel prices may go down by 1 peso and 70 centavos to 1 peso and 90 centavos per liter, and gasoline prices by 4 pesos and 70 centavos to 4 pesos and 90 centavos per liter. Rodela Romero, Assistant Director of the Department of Energy Oil Industry Management Bureau, said the expected rollback is due to the temper oil demand of China due to COVID cases and the threat of global recession and economic slowdown. For July 12 to 18, gasoline prices in Metro Manila range from 71.49 to 90.45 per liter, diesel from 75.30 to 88.90, and kerosene from 80.04 to 90 pesos and 65 centavos. In other news, 14 people were killed when a military helicopter crashed on Friday in northwestern Mexico, according to the Navy. The Navy said the cause of the crash is still unknown. It said the aircraft was carrying 15 people, and the sole survivor was receiving medical treatment after the crash in the state of Sinaloa. The helicopter went down while carrying out unspecified operational activities, according to the statement, adding that an investigation could be carried out into the cause. In Africa, where there's been a sharp rise in the number of diseases passing from animals to people in the last decade, according to the UN Health Agency, WHO. According to the World Health Organization, the threat for Africa is severe after new data analysis revealed a 63% increase in the number of animal-to-human outbreaks on the continent from 2012 to 2022 compared to the previous 10 years. With more on these zoonotic diseases, as they're also known, here's WHO's Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti. Let's listen in.
1 in every 3 confirmed public health events in the region in the past decade was a zoonotic disease outbreak, with a significant spike in 2019 and 2020, when these diseases accounted for half of all public health events. A deeper dive reveals that Ebola and similar hemorrhagic fevers constitute nearly 70% of these outbreaks. The remainder include, among others, monkeypox, dengue fever, anthrax, and plague. It's true that the infections originating in animals have been jumping to humans for centuries. But as rising urbanization encroaches on the natural habitats of the continent's wildlife and a demand for food from an especially fast-growing population burgeons, the risk is heightened. The addition of improved road, rail, and air links, which remove the natural barrier that poor transportation infrastructure provided, opens the way for the spread of zoonotic disease outbreaks from remote to urban areas.
Now, to keep populations safe, Dr. Moeti urged greater cooperation among human, animal, and environmental health experts working in collaboration with affected communities. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Araw-araw may bagong kaalaman. Dahil sa Tony Knows, everybody knows! Your Kuya Tony Petgaba na hindi naubusan ng tips. Siyempre, from DIY to life hacks, sagot ko na yan. Saan ka pa? Let's all play together. Let's have fun together. Tara na, sumali at makigulo sa aming Kada Challenge. Sa kada umaga, kompleto na ang inyong umaga.
Welcome back. Helping keep kids fed during the summer in the U.S., the Department of Agriculture, the USDA, in partnership with states and territories across that country, is working with urgency to provide food benefits for the summer months to eligible children. Jeff Sanidad reports from Washington, D.C. Jeff.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, states and territories across the country partnered to provide food benefits for the summer months to eligible children. As of July 8, there are 27 states and territories, including Puerto Rico, set up to provide these benefits to an estimated 13 million children. USDA's Food and Nutrition Service Administrator Cindy Long says for a long time now, millions of families have struggled to keep their kids fed and healthy during the summer while schools are out. Long says child food benefits can bridge the gap and help families provide the nourishment their children deserve. These benefits are aimed to help American families in need cope with the rising food cost. Children are eligible for this temporary nutrition benefit known as summer PEBT if they receive free or reduced price meals during the school year. If they are under age 6 and live in a household receiving SNAP benefits, they are eligible too. The benefits are loaded onto a debit type card and can be used to purchase food. Families of eligible children typically receive $391 per child for the summer, with a higher rate for families in Alaska, Hawaii, and the territories. For a list of states and territories participating in the Child Food Benefits for Summer program, go to usda.gov. Jeff Sanidad, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Jeff. Staying in the U.S., a bomb scare at San Francisco Airport. It sparked an evacuation of the international terminal on Friday evening, according to local police. Take a look. Now, officers received a bomb threat and found a suspicious package, according to the media relations team of the San Francisco Police Department, writing this on Twitter during the early evening. And just after midnight, the airport, which handled more than 3 million passengers in 2020, according to its own most up-to-date figures, said police have cleared the international terminal. SFO resumes normal operations. It also added that local rail links to the hub had started working again. The police force added on Twitter that officers have searched at Fly SFO International Term, removed several suspicious packages, safe and clear to enter, resuming airport operations. According to police in a CBS report, a man was taken into custody, but other details were not immediately available. Still in the U.S., the Department of Transportation announced its first Bill of Rights for travelers with disabilities. Here's Arlene Ocampo from our Washington, D.C. Bureau.
The U.S. Department of Transportation, or USDOT, publishes the first ever airline passengers with disabilities Bill of Rights. The department also issues a notice to airlines to seat young children next to a parent with no additional charge. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says these actions are steps toward ensuring an air travel system that works for everyone. Buttigieg says all air travelers deserve safe, accessible, affordable, and reliable airline service. The historic Bill of Rights will empower travelers with disabilities to understand and assert their rights. It will also help ensure that U.S. and foreign air carriers and their contractors uphold those rights. The department warns it will act against any airline whose seating policies and practices are barriers to a child sitting next to an adult family member or other accompanying adult family member. The actions announced by the department also include addressing consumer complaints and refunds. The department says that according to the latest air travel consumer report, consumer complaints against airlines are up more than 300% above pre-pandemic levels. Arlene Ocampo, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, British railway workers have voted to a further strike this month in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Ryan Florentino reports from our UK bureau.
Workers at rail operators and Network Rail will strike for 24 hours on the 27th of July in a dispute over pay, the RMT union has announced. The news comes after the union rejected a pay offer from Network Rail, which it described as paltry, and after 3 rail strikes last month, which crippled services across the country. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch said the offer from Network Rail represents a real terms pay cut for our members, and the paltry sum is conditional on RMT members agreeing to drastic changes in their working lives. We have made progress on compulsory redundancies, but Network Rail are still seeking to make our members poorer, when we have won, in some cases, double what they are offering with other rail operators. The train operating companies remain stubborn and are refusing to make any new offer which deals with job security and pay. Mr. Lynch said that Network Rail members will strike from 2 a.m. onwards for 24 hours, and members of the train operating companies will take action from just after midnight on the same day. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Ryan Florentino, and we live in extraordinary times.
On a lighter note, it's a rather special snack for the animals. In a wildlife park in northeastern France, along with much of the southwestern Europe, the animals are enduring an extreme heat wave, and in a bid to keep them cool, an animal keeper is hanging fruit ice lollies from trees. Let's take a look. And finally in our news, on the heels of Tuesday's release of the first images from NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, data from the telescope's commissioning period is now being released according to NASA on the Space Telescope Science Institute's Mikulski Archive for Space Telescopes. Now the data includes images of Jupiter and images and spectra of several asteroids captured to test the telescope's instruments before science operations officially began July 12. Fans of Jupiter will recognize some familiar features of our solar system's enormous planet in these images seen through Webb's infrared gaze. Clearly visible at left is Europa, a moon with a probable ocean below its thick icy crust and the target of NASA's forthcoming Europa Clipper mission. What's more, Europa's shadow can be seen to the left of the Great Red Spot. Other visible moons in these images include Thebe and Metis. Scientists were especially eager to see these images because they are proof that Webb can observe the satellites and rings near bright solar system objects such as Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. And that is today's broadcast. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.